50G. That is the number printed on Oliver Bearman's crash data from Suzuka. 50 times the force of gravity slamming a 19-year-old into a concrete wall because the car in front of him lost 30 kilometers per hour in the space of a heartbeat. No warning, no lights, no signal of any kind. 1 second the car ahead was racing, the next second it was a wall. And everyone, the FIA, the teams, the drivers, everyone knew this was going to happen. They were told. Before the season even started, drivers looked at the energy rules and said, someone is going to get seriously hurt. 3 races later, they were right. But here is the part that nobody is talking about. The crash is not why Formula One just did something it has never done before. The crash was the excuse. The real reason is worse. And by the time I walk you through what actually changed, who pushed for it, and which teams just had their championship strategy destroyed overnight, you will understand why every single team voted yes to rules they hate. Because they did not vote for better racing. They voted to survive. Let me show you exactly what happened. 6 weeks. That is how long it took to rewrite the biggest regulation change in Formula One history. 4 separate meetings. Drivers, engineers, team principals, power unit manufacturers, FIA officials, and Formula One management. All of them in the same room, arguing over the same numbers, and arriving at the same terrifying conclusion. The 2026 formula, as written, does not work. Not needs adjustment, not requires fine-tuning. The fundamental architecture of how these cars make and use power produces 2 outcomes that Formula One cannot sell to anyone. Qualifying sessions where the fastest driver does not get pole, and race conditions where the speed difference between 2 cars on the same straight can reach 50 kilometers per hour based on battery charge alone. George Russell said it out loud. The fastest driver does not get pole. The driver with the best energy algorithm gets pole. Let that land. The purest test of speed in motorsport. 1 lap, everything on the line. And the result is decided by software, not by the driver who brakes latest, not by the driver who carries the most speed through a corner, by the team whose laptop runs the best charging script. That is not a regulation problem. That is an identity crisis. And the racing is worse. Picture this. You are doing 300 kilometers per hour on a straight. The car ahead of you has been at full electric power, 475 horsepower from the motor alone. Then its battery drains. It enters a recharge cycle. And in the SE, the changes fall into 4 groups: qualifying, race, a brand new safety system, and wet weather. Start with qualifying because this is where the sport was bleeding credibility the fastest. Under the original 2026 rules, cars recharge up to 8 megajoules per qualifying lap, but the recharge rate was capped at 250 kilowatts. That cap forced drivers to spread their charging across multiple sections of the track. And that is what created super clipping. Drivers lifting off the throttle on straights, coasting through sections where they should be flat out, just to refill their battery. At the first 3 races, qualifying laps had visible stretches of coasting. Cars that should be screaming at full power through a straight were lifting. On camera, it looks bizarre. For the drivers, it feels like a betrayal of what qualifying is supposed to be. The Miami fix changes 2 numbers. Maximum per lap recharge drops from 8 megajoules to 7, and peak recharge power rises from 250 to 350 kilowatts. Less total energy needs to be stored, so less reason to coast. And when the car does recharge, it happens faster. The charging compresses into a shorter, sharper window instead of being smeared across 3 or 4 straights. The FIA estimates this cuts super clipping to roughly 2 to 4 seconds per lap. Still there, but nearly invisible compared to the current mess. Now the race changes. This is where it gets serious. This is where people were going to die. 2 new caps. Boost mode, the system that replaced DRS, is now capped at plus 150 kilowatts above baseline power. And electric motor output outside designated acceleration zones is limited to 250 kilowatts. What that does is shrink the speed gap between a car at full power and a car in recharge. The 50 km/h difference that existed under the original rules drops to something drivers can actually react to. If you are the kind of person who actually wants to understand what is happening under the surface of Formula One, not just the podium results, subscribe. This channel breaks down rule changes, technical shifts, and strategy calls every single week. At Miami, on the main straight and the back straight between turns 10 and 11, you should see the gap narrow from something dangerous to something raceable. The chasing car still gets a boost. Overtaking still happens. But the closing speed no longer creates a scenario where the trailing driver has zero time to react. Think about turn 1 at Miami. Long straight, heavy braking zone, tight right-hander. Under the old rules, a car at full power arrives behind a recharging car with 50 extra kilometers per hour. The braking zone becomes a coin flip. Under the new caps, drivers can race each other into that corner based on skill and nerve, not battery lottery. Then there is the change nobody expected. A brand new system that did not exist before Suzuka: low power detection. If a car's acceleration drops below a set threshold, meaning it has entered a sudden recharge cycle, the system activates automatically. It feeds minimum electric power to keep the car moving at a safe speed, and it turns on flashing rear and side warning lights. This is new. Under the original rules, there was no external signal that a car was about to become a near-stationary obstacle on a racing line. The driver behind had to figure it out from data on the wheel or from the car ahead suddenly growing in their windscreen. At Miami, when you see a car's rear lights start flashing in a new pattern, that car is in a low-power state. The driver behind knows, and if you are watching from home, you will see it too. Now, who wins, and who just lost their championship? Mercedes has won every race in 2026. Russell and 18-year-old Kimi Antonelli have taken all 3 victories. Antonelli is now the youngest championship leader in Formula One history. Mercedes built their advantage partly around a sophisticated energy management system. They optimized for the old framework. The one that rewarded lift and coast, the one that rewarded software over bravery. That framework just changed. If super clipping at 350 kilowatts becomes as efficient as lift and coast harvesting, the strategic edge that Mercedes spent hundreds of millions developing narrows, not disappears. Narrows. Ferrari sits second, but has been closer to the midfield than to Mercedes. Leclerc and Hamilton have shown devastating qualifying pace in corners, but they lose everything on the straights. If the caps shrink straight-line speed gaps, Ferrari could close the distance at a circuit like Miami where the straights are long and the corners reward grip. Red Bull is learning its own engine for the first time, the Red Bull Ford Power Unit. The team that dominated 2023 and 2024 is now rebuilding from nothing on the power side. Verstappen dragged the car from 20th to 6th in Australia on chassis alone. But the engine is not there yet, and the cap changes might actually hurt Red Bull less than anyone because their energy strategy was already behind. A lower ceiling means a smaller penalty for imperfection. McLaren might benefit the most. Twin electric failures in China left both cars dead in the garage. They are struggling with the new power unit concept, but a lower energy cap means the gap between a perfect strategy and a broken one shrinks. If your software is wrong, less total energy means less total punishment. And here is the callback that matters. Remember what I said at the beginning. Every team voted yes, even Mercedes, the team with every reason to protect the status quo. Their internal message was clear. Use a scalpel, not a baseball bat. What passed on April 20th is a scalpel. Whether it cuts deep enough to change the order, only Miami's timing screens can answer that. But, and this is the part the FIA does not want you to think about too carefully, none of this fixes the actual problem. The foundational issue remains. The battery is too small for what the regulations demand. The mismatch between what the battery stores and what the car needs to deploy is what creates every behavior that has damaged the sport's image. Lowering the megajoule limit helps. Raising the superclipping limit helps. Neither one changes the architecture. If Miami does not work, if the sprint on Friday still looks like software management, if the speed gaps on Saturday still reach 30+ kilometers per hour, if the racing on Sunday still feels artificial, then the conversation moves somewhere the sport does not want to go. Toward 2027, toward a potential rewrite of the active aero, the heavy hybrid concept, the entire foundation of these regulations. And that rewrite comes with a political disaster that has no clean resolution. The 2026 rules brought in Audi, Honda, Ford, Cadillac. These manufacturers committed billions based on the current technical framework. The green fuel, the bigger electric side, the simpler power unit, those are the reasons the boardroom said yes. If the FIA rewrites the formula again for 2027, it risks the exact manufacturer exodus the 2026 rules were designed to prevent. Teams spent up to $215 million building these cars. A major rule reset forces another full development cycle. The big teams absorb it. The small teams, including Cadillac, a brand new constructor that built its entire business case around regulatory stability, may not. So here is where we are. The biggest rule change in 60 years just got rewritten after 3 races. The FIA called these regulations the future of Formula One. 3 weekends in, they are already patching them. Miami is not just a race, it is an exam. Sprint qualifying on Friday afternoon is the first answer sheet. And every team boss, every engineer, and every driver on that grid will be watching the same data. Not who crosses the line first, but whether the cars look like they are racing. Because that is the question Formula One still cannot answer. After billions of dollars, years of development, and 3 races that nearly killed a driver, are these cars racing, or are they calculating? May 1st, Miami, that is when we find out. Subscribe. Race day coverage drops the moment the lights go out.